Stephen Miller entered that congressional hearing room believing he was going to blow up Jasmine Crockett on national television. He was all prepared with his talking points memorized, his insults lined up, and that telltale smirk that indicated he was in the know and you weren't. For years, he had taken pride in his political machinations, but this time it would be different. What Miller did not know was that Congresswoman Crockett had been sitting on dynamite information regarding his private life for weeks, information that included Elon Musk, his wife Katie, and pictures that would cut short his career in under 60 seconds. Imagine this: one well-timed question, one explosive moment, and a career founded on cruelty, manipulation, and secrets is shattered in one fell swoop. The power of timing, the devastation of truth. This isn't just politics, it's personal, and you're about to see how a single moment can change everything. The moment happened at exactly 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. C-SPAN was broadcasting live to millions of viewers. The cameras were rolling, the room was tense, and the world was about to witness something that no one could have predicted. Stephen Miller inched forward to his microphone, poised to land the punch he believed would destroy Jasmine Crockett's career. Instead, she fixed him in the eyes, flashed that knowing smile, the smile destined to become legendary, and uttered 6 words that caused his face to turn utterly white. "Stephen, how's Katie enjoying Austin lately?" The ensuing silence lasted precisely 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds, you could almost see Stephen Miller's whole world cracking. His lips parted a little, his fists clutched the table so hard his knuckles whitened. One person in the media gallery whispered, "Oh my God!" And Jasmine Crockett? She sat tight-lipped, unruffled, waiting for his answer, anticipating what was to come. What transpired next was not merely a scandal, it was the downfall of a career. Miller had established his career on being the brightest in the room, always ahead of the curve, always prepared to take advantage of others' vulnerabilities. But now, the same strategies that he had employed for decades were directed back at him, and the world was witnessing it. This instant would be one of the most viral political moments of the year, destroy Miller's career and make Jasmine Crockett a legend. But in order to see why this moment was so heartbreaking, you have to know who these individuals truly are. You have to know why they fought for years. Because this wasn't political, it was about power, hypocrisy, and secrets. Stephen Miller is not a typical political advisor. He's the one who made a career out of taking down other people, tearing them apart with their secrets and vulnerabilities and ruining their lives. For decades, Miller was the architect of some of the nastiest political assassinations in recent history. He didn't just win debates, he annihilated his competitors. He made private lives public spectacles, and he did it all while concealing his own dark secrets. He was a destroyer, a man who rode on destruction. But what if the man who spends decades tearing down others finally sees his own secrets unveiled? What if a person who has spent a lifetime excavating other people's personal lives is compelled to examine his own? That's when Jasmine Crockett enters the scene. Crockett was more than a politician. She wasn't merely a congresswoman. She was a one-time defense lawyer who had never lost a trial because she never entered a courtroom without learning every fact that counted. She was thorough. She never accused anyone of anything she couldn't prove. She didn't throw punches she couldn't deliver. And she never, ever bluffed. Miller and Crockett had been dancing around each other like wolves for 3 years. It began with an intense immigration debate in Phoenix, where Crockett denounced Miller's policies as government-sanctioned cruelty on the live TV show. Miller, embarrassed by the public loss, made it his mission to ruin Crockett's career. He appeared at her speaking engagements. He sent after-midnight emails to her staff requesting information that she had already given him. He even appeared at her committee hearings, just sitting there, biding his time until he could pounce. But what he was unaware of was that Jasmine Crockett was also preparing for him, not for his policy queries, but for the very moment when she would reveal his worst secrets. 3 weeks ago, Crockett received a message that turned everything around. It was from Ayanna, a college acquaintance who worked as a venture capitalist in Austin now. The text read, "Girl, you won't believe who I just spotted Elon with." The images that came next would reveal the year's largest political scandal, but they would also provide Crockett with the one thing she needed to put an end to Stephen Miller's career for good: the truth. And that's when things get dark. This wasn't political. This was hypocrisy. A man who had made his livelihood ruining other folks' lives was now keeping secrets of his own, and Jasmine Crockett was fixing to let the whole world find out. The story really gets started 3 weeks prior to that hearing at an upscale SpaceX donor party in Austin, Texas. It was the sort of party where you had to contribute a minimum of $5 million just to gain entrance. Elon Musk was in residence with some of America's richest and most influential citizens. The list was privately held. No reporters, no cameras, no social media permitted. No one was looking forward to seeing Katie Miller there, however, by herself. Katie had informed Stephen that she was traveling to Dallas to see her sister, but she drove directly to Austin and entered the SpaceX party dressed in a beautiful black gown. Ayanna Blackwell, a venture capitalist, noticed her right away. Katie was noticeable among a group of tech moguls, but what truly caught Ayanna's eye was the way Katie and Elon were behaving with each other. This wasn't mere small talk between strangers. They were giggling about inside jokes. They were standing too near. The manner in which they were behaving was way too intimate for two individuals who had just met. Ayanna snapped 2 rapid shots from where she stood on the rooftop. In the first, Elon was leaning in close to Katie's ear, whispering something that made her laugh in a personally unmistakable way. In the second, Katie's hand lay on Elon's chest, and the expression on his face was altogether too loving for a married woman. The morning after, Ayanna forwarded the photos to Jasmine. Jasmine did not leak the photos. She did not make them public. Instead, she took a smarter approach. She started making quiet calls to people she trusted. She didn't share the photos. She simply asked questions. "Have you heard anything about Katie Miller lately? Anyone know why she was in Texas last week?" Within 48 hours, the whispers began spreading through Washington like wildfire. Katie's social media was suddenly under scrutiny. She hadn't been seen at any public events with Stephen Miller. Folks were beginning to wonder, but nobody knew anything. Nobody except Jasmine Crockett, while Stephen Miller was as clueless as a bag of hammers. He was so intent on getting ready for his moment in the hearing that he did not see the slight transformations around him. He did not see how political insiders ceased to make eye contact with him at gatherings. He did not see his wife being distant and preoccupied for weeks. On the morning of the hearing, Miller awoke feeling upbeat. He donned his finest suit, practiced his opening words, and strode into the committee room, ready for what he imagined would be his greatest moment. But he had no concept of what was in store for him. As the hearing commenced, Miller launched a barrage. He leaned into the mic with that characteristic swagger and started his question. "Congresswoman Crockett, your record indicates a consistent history of choosing political stagecraft over reality-based solutions. Why do you keep supporting policies that have had the direct result of more border chaos?" It was a vintage Miller maneuver, provocative, full of assumptions, meant to get his opponent on the defensive. But rather than falling apart, Crockett simply smiled and replied, "Stephen, I'd be glad to talk policy with someone who's actually concerned about policy rather than personal theater. But do you really want to have that discussion today?" That's when the room started to change. Crockett was playing by different rules than Miller anticipated. Her tone was even, measured, and replete with authority. She wasn't shaken by his assaults. She wasn't intimidated. And then she came out with the question that would turn everything on its head. "How's Katie enjoying Austin lately?" The room halted. Miller's face shifted from confident to white in seconds. He couldn't say anything. His hands clung to the table, but he couldn't utter a word. Someone muttered, "Oh shit." And Jasmine Crockett, cool as a cucumber, simply waited. Then she delivered the bomb. "I have friends in Austin who said that they saw her at a SpaceX event last week," she explained, taking out her phone. "Very private gathering. Very intimate setting. She was having a great time with Elon Musk." And that's when it all came crashing down. The room burst. Not with a loud noise, but you could sense the tension change. Phones began ringing. Writers started typing wildly. Everyone in the room was aware that Stephen Miller's career was oversmiled, not with a large smile, just with a small, knowing curve at the edge of her mouth that somehow managed to pack the whole room with tension. "Stephen," she said, her tone calm and composed, "how is Katie liking Austin these days?" The ensuing silence was deafening. Miller's expression shifted from confident to bewildered to positively pale within approximately 3 seconds. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. The whole room sensed the change. The heaviness of the moment weighed over everyone, holding their breath as they watched Miller slowly unravel. It seemed like all that he had struggled so hard to create was unraveling in front of him in that moment. A voice in the gallery was overheard muttering, "Oh shit," loud enough for the microphones to catch. "What?" Miller finally got out, the words struggling their way out of his throat. "Austin, Texas," Crockett went on, her tone silky and unbroken. "Your wife has been there a lot lately. I was just inquiring as to how she is enjoying it. The weather, the people, the private parties. You know?" Miller's hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles turned white. He tried to maintain his composure, but it was slipping. "I don't know what you're talking about, really," he said, his voice shaking, the facade cracking. Crockett raised an eyebrow, letting the silence build for just a moment longer before she spoke again. "Because I have some friends in Austin who said they saw her at a SpaceX event last week," she continued smoothly. "A very private affair, a very intimate setting. She was clearly enjoying herself with Elon Musk." The room exploded, not boisterously, but you could sense the mood shift entirely. Phones began to buzz. Reporters typed wildly. Committee members shared shocked looks, their eyes opening in astonishment. The walls seemed to have been removed. Miller felt the presence of the whole room watching him, the secret's weight suspended in the air like a mist. For once, he was revealed, not as the great manipulator, but as a man ensnared in his own scandal. "This is completely inappropriate," Miller said, his voice rising with panic. "We're here to discuss policy, not engage in gossip and innuendo." "Oh, this is not gossip," Crockett answered coolly, taking out her phone. "This is documentation." She stood up with the phone, not displaying the screen, but letting the implication hang in the air in the room. "Do you want me to share the photos with everybody, or would you like to answer some questions regarding border security?" That's when Stephen Miller totally lost it. "You can't do this," he bellowed, his voice breaking with desperation. "This is a congressional hearing, not some tabloid spectacle. You can't make accusations out of thin air." "I'm not making accusations," Crockett said suavely, her very calmness contrasting harshly with Miller's frenzy. "I'm inquiring about your wife's travel schedule, but if you'd rather be talking evidence." She raised her phone again, this time letting the tension simmer in the room. No one could see the screen, but everyone knew precisely what she was threatening to show them. It was as though the truth was resting in her palm, poised to be unleashed. Miller jumped up so fast that he spilled his water glass. "This is harassment. This is a planned assault. I call on the chairman to shut down this character assassination." The committee chairman, having observed the spectacle with half-hidden incredulity, shrugged. "Congresswoman Crockett simply asked you a straightforward question about your family, Mr. Miller. If you do not wish to respond, you may go back to your pre-approved questions on immigration policy." Miller scanned the room, frantically searching for someone to defend him. Each camera was trained on him. Each journalist took notes. His aides, the individuals who had always stood behind him, now gazed at him with horror and disbelief. You can't," Miller stuttered, the sharp, tough political tactician he used to be now a shattered man, stumbling before the cameras. "Stephen," Crockett said, her voice now filled with what almost sounded like sympathy. "Maybe we should take a break, give you some time to call your wife, check in on how she's doing in Austin, make sure she's safe." Miller's face went from pale to bright red. "How dare you?" My marriage is none of your business. Crockett nodded, unwavering. Absolutely right. Your marriage is none of my business. But when a person makes his whole career out of criticizing the private lives of other people, their family values, their private decisions, and then his own family begins to make very public decisions, well, that becomes everybody's business, doesn't it? The room went totally silent. Miller stood there, quivering with anger, but no words would emerge. Everyone in the room recognized that Crockett was correct. For years, Stephen Miller had made his career out of tearing down other people, revealing their vulnerabilities, employing their secrets to destroy them. But now, Jasmine Crockett had turned the tables on him. She had revealed him for what he really was, a man who lived on secrets and a man who would be brought down by them. Let me think, Crockett said softly. We ought to close this hearing so you can take care of your personal business, unless you want to keep talking about asylum processing policy while your Kurtz's wife is processing her own case in Austin. Miller seized his papers, crammed them into his briefcase, and stalked out of the room without saying another word. The chairman of the committee demanded a recess, but nobody was even thinking about procedure at this point. The damage was done. Within 10 minutes, Jasmine Crockett had utterly obliterated Stephen Miller's reputation, revealed his largest secret, and made him a national laughingstock, all without ever raising her voice, never losing her cool, and never uttering something that wasn't the absolute truth. The bomb went off and took out everything in its path. Within 30 minutes of Miller's departure from the hearing room, #ShermanMillerMeltdown was trending on Twitter. Within 1 hour, the video clip received more than 2 million views. Towards the end of the day, it was the year's most watched political moment. But the real story? That was only just beginning. At 4:15 p.m., just 2 hours after the hearing had adjourned, TMZ broke an exclusive story entitled Political Power Couple in Crisis. Stephen Miller's wife spotted getting cozy with Elon Musk in Austin. The report used the photographs Ayanna had taken, as well as several others from various angles of Katie and Elon, who seemed quite like a couple. By 6 p.m., all of the top news channels were reporting the story. CNN aired a segment titled Marriage, Politics, and Public Meltdowns. Fox News attempted to frame it as an assault on conservative family values, but even their anchors were unable to contain their surprise at Miller's total collapse on television. MSNBC interviewed body language analysts to break down Miller's response. "You can see the moment when he realizes his career is finished," said one analyst, playing back the clip in slow motion. "How his hands tremble, how his voice cracks. This is a man who knows he's been totally exposed." Social media was merciless. TikTok influencers made Miller's "How dare you" meltdown into comedy gold. Instagram memes drew parallels with legendary political sex scandals of the past. Reddit users broke down every single frame of hearing footage, highlighting all the times that Miller's facade totally cracked. And most hurtful were the political insiders who had collaborated with Miller for a long time. One ex-colleague spoke to Politico. "Stephen's whole brand rested on being the smartest, best-prepared person in a room. To see him get utterly outmaneuvered by Crockett like that undermines everything he's built his reputation on." The deafening silence from Katie Miller. She didn't answer reporters' calls. She didn't tweet. She didn't go on social media at all. She didn't even have her representatives issue a statement. She just vanished. But Elon Musk saw to it that the world understood he was in on this new reality. At 11:47 p.m. that evening, he tweeted, "Life is complicated. Truth is simple." The tweet had 3.2 million likes and 800,000 retweets. The tale had developed into more than merely a political scandal. It was a moment of cultural about hypocrisy, power, and accountability. Women around the country were posting clips of Crockett's performance with comments such as, "This is how you deal with a bully." Young political aides dissected her approach, admiring how she had managed to frame the story. But maybe the strongest reaction of all was from other politicians who had been bullied by Miller in the years prior. Senator Elizabeth Warren posted on Twitter, Sometimes karma has perfect timing. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wrote, "Fascinating to watch someone finally get held accountable for their own tactics." 3 days later, the Washington Post ran a long investigative piece on Miller's career. The title was "The Miller Method: How a Political Hitman Finally Met His Match." The piece featured interviews with several dozen politicians, aides, and reporters who had been taken down by Miller's methods over the years. There was one constant theme: Miller's utter inability to deal with having his own tactics turned on him. He could dish it out, but most definitely could not take it. "Mr. Musk," she answered, not rising up from behind her desk. "Is this regarding Katie?" Elon nodded and sat down across from her without being asked. He looked tired, as if he had not slept in days, and there was a kind of tension about him, like he carried a burden on his chest that he was desperate to shed. "I want you to understand that what happened between Katie and me was not premeditated. It was not some plot to embarrass Stephen Miller or engender a political scandal." Crockett examined his face intently. Years of reading people in courtrooms and congressional hearings had honed her almost supernatural skill at reading lies. Elon, she knew, was being truthful. "I believe you," she told him, but that did not alter what had already happened. "That doesn't change what happened in that hearing room." "No, it doesn't," Elon had replied, his voice a good deal softer now. "And truthfully, now that I've seen that video, I'm not sure I do feel sorry for it. Stephen Miller has ruined people's lives for years using their personal data. Maybe he needed to taste his own medicine." What Elon said to her next would never be part of any formal document, but it showed exactly how much impact Miller's methods had had on politics in Washington. 3 years ago, Elon clarified, his tone deepening, "Miller attempted to kill a renewable energy bill I was sponsoring by leaking private text messages between myself and a senator's wife." Nothing objectionable, just policy chatter about things like health care and education. But Miller manipulated them to make it seem like I was purchasing political clout through personal relationships. Crockett inclined forward. This was a new story to her, and she was surprised to hear it. "The bill died," Elon went on. "Not due to the policy, but due to the scandal Miller created. That legislation had the potential to create hundreds of thousands of jobs and speed America's clean energy transition by 5 years. But Miller killed it simply to gain political points." "And you never publicly replied?" Crockett questioned, astounded. "I attempted to rise above it," Elon shrugged, his eyes glinting with ironic humor. "Mistake. Miller interpreted that as weakness, and he's been getting for me ever since. Every business move, every tweet, every relationship, people have been monitoring them, waiting for fodder." Crockett settled back in her seat, taking it all in that Elon had just shared. It wasn't only about Miller singling out his political rivals, it was about something personal. He had specifically used his power against anyone who didn't comply with his way. "So when Katie contacted you," Crockett spoke slowly, "she wasn't just escaping from him, she was escaping a life founded on manipulation and control?" "Exactly." Elon's tone softened. "She said she was sick of being married to a man who saw every human exchange as a source of potential weaponry. She wanted to be in the company of people who build things rather than demolish them." The discussion went on for more than an hour. Elon disclosed information about Miller's behind-the-scenes activities that even Crockett wasn't aware of. The opposition research companies he employed to pry into his enemies' personal lives, the private detectives who tailed politicians' spouses, the network of gossip bloggers and social networking accounts he employed to disseminate harmful information. Stephen Miller made politics a blood sport, Elon said, as if he were about to take his leave. "What you did in that hearing room wasn't cruel, it was justice." But the most insightful moment came when Crockett asked why he was actually there. "Because I wanted to ensure you get something," Elon stated, his tone weighted with sincerity. "What you did required unconscionable bravery." Most politicians would have ignored the news about Katie and me or leaked it anonymously to damage Miller without any personal risk. But you stood him up and called him out, person to person. That doesn't happen here very often. After Elon walked out, Crockett remained in her office by herself, thinking about their conversation. She understood that Miller's fall wasn't simply the result of one affair or one scandal. It was the product of years of built-up karma finally getting someone who had offended too many and hurt too many. The following morning, she got a call that confirmed just how much influence Miller's had. Senator Amy Klobuchar was on the phone, and she sounded relieved. "Jasmine, I have to thank you for what you did," Klobuchar said, her tone dripping with appreciation. "I don't know if you realize this, but Miller has been attempting to uncover dirt on my family for 2 years, ever since I spoke out against his border policies. He's had others researching my husband's business activities, my daughter's college application essays, even my aged mother's medical history." Crockett was amazed. "Amy, why wouldn't you ever speak up?" "Because I was afraid," Klobuchar confessed. "Miller had this reputation for being untouchable. Folks were afraid to cross him because he always appeared to have something on everyone. But seeing him totally lose it on live TV, it's like you shattered some kind of spell over the whole town." And in the days that followed, there were similar calls from other politicians and their surrogates, senators who had been compelled to switch their votes on matters of crucial legislation due to fear of what Miller would find out about their personal lives. Governors who had studiously avoided taking stands on contentious issues, knowing that Miller was monitoring, waiting for an excuse to pounce. The image that emerged was deeply disturbing. Miller hadn't simply been a political operator. He had been operating a protection racket, an affect, employing fear and intimidation in order to dictate the political process. He had become a political gangster. One of the congressmen spoke to her off the record. Everybody knew what he was doing, but nobody wanted to be the one to take him on directly. "You changed that," the congressman said, sounding grateful. A month following the hearing, Jasmine Crockett was invited to present on political strategy and communication at Harvard Law School. In the Q&A session, one student asked her about that time she ruined Miller's career. "I didn't ruin Stephen Miller," Crockett replied matter-of-factly. "Stephen Miller ruined Stephen Miller. I just made sure that people could watch it happen." When asked for further explanation of her plan, Crockett smiled the exact same wise smile that was responsible for launching 1,000 memes. "The strongest weapon in politics isn't what you say," she said. "It's when you say it." Stephen Miller spent decades leveraging people's secrets against them. He simply never thought other people would have secrets about him. The crowd burst into applause, but Crockett was not done. "Here's what everyone needs to know about power," she went on. "It is not about who yells the loudest or punches the hardest. True power is built on preparation, patience, and the knowledge that the truth ultimately prevails." Stephen Miller lost sight of that lesson, and it cost him everything. But then one of the graduate students in the back of the room posed a question that left the whole auditorium in stunned silence. "Congresswoman, do you believe that what you did was ethical, taking someone's personal life and using it to ruin their career?" Crockett hesitated for a very long time before responding. "That is a great question, and it's one I have reflected on extensively since that hearing." She moved over toward the student who had posed the question, her eyes unblinking. "What I did was hold up a mirror to someone who had made a career out of making other people's private lives into weapons. For years, Miller went after politicians' families, their marriages, their kids, their inner demons. He politicized personal pain, and he did so without regard for the cost to human life." The room was dead silent now. Crockett scanned the room, locking eyes with each individual present before he went on. "So when I knew things about his personal life, I made a decision. I could have gone high and ignored it, which would have enabled him to keep hurting other people, or I could let him know firsthand what it is like to have your private business be public ammunition. I decided to hold him accountable in his own terms. And yes, it ruined his career, but it also released dozens of other politicians from the intimidation he had been exercising over them. Sometimes the best thing you can do is make a bully experience what it's like to be bullied." The ovation that followed was deafening. But more significant, Crockett observed in the students' faces that she had taught them something fundamental about power, accountability, and the sometimes rough and tumble thing that political justice involves. Later in the night, at a private dinner with Harvard faculty members, one of them asked her what she intended to do next. "The same thing I've always done," Crockett replied. "My job, fight for my constituents, work on legislation that actually helps people, and make sure that bullies like Stephen Miller understand that their tactics have consequences." "But you've become a national figure now," the professor pressed. "There are already rumors about presidential campaigns, Senate runs, even cabinet positions in future administrations." Crockett smiled. "Power isn't about titles or positions. It's about using whatever platform you have to make positive change. Whether that's from a congressional office, a Senate seat, or somewhere else entirely, it doesn't matter to me. What matters is that Stephen Miller's era of political terrorism is over, and everyone who comes after him knows that their actions have consequences." 6 months after that, Stephen Miller was a mid-level lobbyist for a small lobbying firm in Virginia, earning a fraction of what he'd made before and trying to rebuild a reputation. That may never be the same. Katie Miller and Elon Musk publicized their relationship officially with a joint appearance at a Miami charity gala. They appeared very happy together, and sources close to them both confirmed they were making long-term plans. Jasmine Crockett? She was a Time magazine Person of the Year nominee for revolutionizing political dialogue and showing the world that intelligence and forethought can conquer rage and intimidation. She lost the award, but she didn't lose anything. She had already gained something much more important: the admiration of anyone who ever was bullied, intimidated, or attacked by those like Stephen Miller. Because sometimes the greatest triumph isn't beating your foe. It's proving to everyone else that your foe can be beaten. This is not a story about one political hearing, one scandal, or one career. It's about resisting those who have used fear and manipulation to bully others for too long. It's about demonstrating that courage, truth, and accountability are enough to end the cycle of intimidation that has characterized our politics for decades. Jasmine Crockett didn't defeat one battle. She sent a strong message to the entire world. Nobody is above the law. Regardless of how high your rank, regardless of how profound your secrets, the truth finds a way out. So now it's our choice. Are we going to just keep letting those who prey on others thrive in power? Or are we going to stand up like we saw Jasmine Crockett stand up and demand accountability? If this story meant something to you, if you believe in the strength of truth and the bravery it takes to stand up against the powerful, hit the like button and subscribe. Leave your thoughts below. What was the highlight of this intense showdown for you? Was it the shocking question that revealed Miller's darkest secrets? Was it the way Crockett flipped the script without once losing her cool? Or was it the inescapable fact that, in the end, the truth prevails? We require more leaders such as Jasmine Crockett, leaders who will not hesitate to use their authority for the greater good. Don't let this opportunity pass us by. Pass this along to others. Let's continue this discussion. We can ensure that no one like Stephen Miller ever has influence again. Thanks for watching, and don't forget, truth is the greatest weapon. Don't allow anybody to tell you otherwise. Catch you in the next video.